Ever heard of the Medellin Cartel? They were the kings of the Colombian drug trade in the 1980s, raking in billions of dollars and causing chaos throughout South America. But how did they rise to power? Let's take a deep dive into the wild and crazy world of the Medellin Cartel. The Medellin Cartel was a notorious criminal organization that rose to power in the 1980s, becoming one of the most powerful and wealthiest drug cartels in history. Based in the city of Medellin, Colombia, the cartel was responsible for the distribution of large quantities of cocaine throughout the world, particularly in the United States. The leaders of the cartel, Pablo Escobar and Jorge Ochoa, were known for their ruthless tactics and their lavish lifestyles, as they raked in billions of dollars in profits.
Relax and take notes while I take totes of the marijuana smoke. Throw you in a choke, gun smoke. Biggie smokes for mayor, the rap slayer, the hooker layer. Motherfuckers say your prayers. Hail Mary, full of grace. Smack the bitch in the face.
The Medellin Cartel was also responsible for countless acts of violence, including bombings, assassinations, and kidnappings, as they fought to protect their territory and maintain their dominance in the drug trade. In this video, we'll take a closer look at the rise of the Medellin Cartel, from its humble beginnings to its eventual downfall. So buckle up, because it's about to be a wild ride through the world of the notorious Medellin Cartel. The Medellin Cartel was founded in the late 1970s by a group of smugglers from the city of Medellin, Colombia. At the time, the Colombian government was cracking down on the illegal drug trade, so the smugglers decided to band together and form the cartel in order to protect their interests. The leaders of the cartel were Pablo Escobar, a notorious drug lord known for his ruthless tactics and his connections to the Colombian government, and Jorge Ochoa, a wealthy businessman with ties to the Colombian elite. Initially, the Medellin Cartel focused on the production and distribution of marijuana, which was in high demand in the United States. They used a network of small planes and boats to smuggle the drug into the country, and they established connections with drug dealers in major cities like Miami and New York. As their business grew, the cartel began to diversify its operations and started producing and distributing cocaine as well. The Medellin Cartel quickly became one of the most powerful and wealthiest criminal organizations in the world. They used their vast profits to bribe government officials, law enforcement officers, and politicians, and they established a network of loyal followers and allies. The cartel was known for its elaborate system of communication and its use of cutting-edge technology, including encrypted radios and satellite phones. As the Medellin Cartel's power and influence grew, so did their reputation for violence. They were known to use intimidation and fear to keep their rivals in check, and they were not afraid to use force to protect their interests. The cartel was responsible for numerous bombings, assassinations, and kidnappings, and they were known to target anyone who posed a threat to their business, including law enforcement officers, government officials, and even civilians. Despite the violence and chaos they caused, the Medellin Cartel continued to thrive and expand, cementing their position as one of the most formidable criminal organizations in the world. By the mid-1980s, the Medellin Cartel had reached the height of its power. They were the dominant force in the Colombian drug trade and were responsible for the distribution of huge quantities of cocaine throughout the world. The cartel's leaders, Pablo Escobar and Jorge Ochoa, were among the wealthiest and most powerful men in the country, and they lived lavish lifestyles that were the stuff of legend. Escobar, in particular, was known for his extravagant tastes and his love of luxury. He owned a sprawling mansion in Medellin that was complete with a private zoo, a helicopter landing pad, and a giant swimming pool. He was also known for his philanthropy, and he used his wealth to fund various charitable projects in the city. Despite his reputation for violence and his involvement in the drug trade, Escobar was popular with many of the poor in Colombia, who saw him as a kind of Robin Hood figure who used his wealth to help those in need. The Medellin Cartel was also known for throwing lavish parties and events that were attended by the wealthy and powerful. These events were often used to celebrate the cartel's successes and to solidify their relationships with key allies and partners. The cartel's members were known for their extravagant tastes, and they spared no expense when it came to indulging their every desire. At the height of their power, the Medellin Cartel was making billions of dollars in profits and had established a near monopoly on the drug trade in Colombia. They were able to dominate the market thanks to their vast network of connections and their ability to bribe government officials and law enforcement officers. However, their success was not without its challenges. The cartel was constantly at war with rival criminal organizations and was targeted by law enforcement agencies around the world. Nevertheless, the Medellin Cartel remained a formidable force and a symbol of the dark side of the drug trade. The fall of the Medellin Cartel was a complex and tumultuous process that took place over several years. There were a number of factors that contributed to the cartel's downfall, including law enforcement efforts, infighting within the organization, and changing political and economic conditions in Colombia. One of the main factors that led to the fall of the Medellin Cartel was the concerted efforts of law enforcement agencies around the world to dismantle the organization and bring its members to justice. In the United States, the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, and other agencies worked closely with Colombian law enforcement to disrupt the cartel's operations and track down its members. The Colombian government also launched a series of military and police campaigns against the cartel, which weakened the organization and disrupted its operations. In addition to these efforts, the Medellin Cartel was also plagued by internal conflicts and divisions. As the organization grew in size and complexity, it became harder to manage and control, and rival factions began to emerge. These factions were often in competition with one another for resources and power, and this infighting weakened the cartel and made it more vulnerable to outside attacks. Finally, the fall of the Medellin Cartel was also influenced by changing economic and political conditions in Colombia. As the country began to emerge from years of economic turmoil and political instability, the government was able to focus more on issues like the drug trade and crime. This helped to create a more favorable environment for law enforcement efforts against the cartel and contributed to the organization's eventual demise. In the end, the fall of the Medellin Cartel was the result of a complex set of factors that came together to bring down one of the most powerful and feared criminal organizations in the world. While the cartel's leaders, Pablo Escobar and Jorge Ochoa, are now remembered as symbols of the dark side of the drug trade, their legacy lives on as a cautionary tale about the dangers and consequences of criminal activity. The rise and fall of the Medellin Cartel is a story of power, wealth, and violence that captured the attention of the world. From its humble beginnings in the late 1970s to its peak of power in the 1980s, the cartel became one of the most influential and feared criminal organizations in history. Led by the notorious Pablo Escobar and Jorge Ochoa, the cartel used its vast resources and connections to dominate the drug trade in Colombia and beyond, raking in billions of dollars in profits and living lavish lifestyles that were the stuff of legend. However, the Medellin Cartel's reign was not to last. Despite their power and influence, the cartel was eventually brought down by a combination of law enforcement efforts, infighting within the organization, and changing economic and political conditions in Colombia. The fall of the Medellin Cartel marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter in the fight against the illegal drug trade. As we look back on the story of the Medellin Cartel, it's important to remember the lessons it has to teach us. The cartel's rise and fall is a cautionary tale about the dangers of criminal activity and the consequences of unchecked power and wealth. It's also a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the ability of law enforcement agencies and communities to come together to fight against the forces of darkness. Thank you for watching this video on the rise and fall of the Medellin Cartel. We hope you enjoyed learning about this fascinating chapter in history and that it gave you a greater appreciation for the complexities and challenges of the global fight against crime and corruption. Until next time, stay safe and keep on learning.